Your phone vibrates against the wooden kitchen table. You look down at the bright screen and see their name. Immediately, before your conscious mind even processes the thought, your physical body reacts. Your stomach ties itself into a tight knot. Your breathing becomes shallow, and your heart rate accelerates. A heavy, suffocating weight settles right in the center of your chest. You stand there, staring at the ringing phone, completely paralyzed by a brutal war inside your own mind. If you answer that call, you know exactly what will happen. You know the subtle criticisms that will be woven into casual conversation. You know the passive-aggressive comments that are designed to make you feel small. You know the emotional manipulation disguised as parental concern that will leave you absolutely drained for the rest of your day. But if you do not answer, the guilt will rise up and eat you alive. Or maybe it is just a normal Tuesday afternoon, and you are already dreading a family gathering that is still 3 months away. You are already rehearsing conversations in your head while driving your car or washing the dishes. You are desperately trying to find the perfect, bulletproof words to defend your life choices, your spouse, your career, or the way you choose to raise your own children. You are a fully grown adult. You have your own life, your own responsibilities, and perhaps your own family to protect. Yet the moment you step into their house, or the moment they raise their voice, you are instantly reduced to a frightened, defensive child walking barefoot on broken glass. And then comes the darkest and most confusing whisper of all. You go to Sunday Mass, you hear the readings, and you remember the Fourth Commandment. Honor your father and your mother. Those words echo in your mind like a judge reading a life sentence from which there is no parole. You have been taught your entire life that being a good Catholic means possessing endless patience, practicing absolute submission, and constantly turning the other cheek to the very people who gave you life. You have convinced yourself that enduring their toxicity, their endless control, and their emotional abuse is simply your heavy cross to bear. You believe that setting a boundary is a betrayal of God. But stop for a moment. Be completely honest with yourself. Are you truly honoring them? Or are you simply terrified of their reaction? What you are calling heroic patience is very often just psychological paralysis. What you are calling Christian virtue is actually deep-rooted fear dressed up in holy language. You think you are carrying a sacred cross, but you are actually just trapped in a psychological prison built by manipulation and reinforced by a tragic misunderstanding of Scripture. If simply letting someone destroy your peace and ruin your mental health made you holy, then abuse would be a sacrament, and it is absolutely not. God did not give you a beautiful mind, an eternal soul, and inherent human dignity, just for you to let someone else crush them under the convenient excuse of biological loyalty. Over 700 years ago, the most brilliant mind in the entire history of the Catholic Church diagnosed this exact struggle with terrifying precision. Saint Thomas Aquinas was a Dominican friar, a towering philosopher, and a doctor of the Church who lived in the 13th century. But Thomas was not a fragile man who lived his whole life hiding in a quiet library. When he decided to join the Dominican order, his own noble family fiercely opposed his vocation. His brothers literally kidnapped him and locked him in a tower for a year to try and control his life choices. Thomas Aquinas knew firsthand what a toxic, controlling family looked like, and he understood the human heart, its complicated attachments, and its darkest dysfunctions far better than most modern therapists. In his monumental masterwork, the Summa Theologiae, Thomas Aquinas systematically destroys the toxic misunderstanding of the Fourth Commandment. He provides a brilliant framework that gives you the theological permission to protect your sanity without losing your soul. He understood this dynamic through a concept he called pietas, an ancient Latin term for filial devotion that goes far beyond simply doing whatever you are told. He paired this with a profound psychological and spiritual map called the ordo caritatis, which means the order of love. He knew that when love is out of order, it becomes profoundly destructive. In fact, Thomas outlines a specific scenario where blindly obeying your parents is not just a mistake, but an actual, objective sin against God. And we will get to that. Before we dive deeply into the mind of this medieval genius, I want you to do something right now. Write one word in the comments below. Just one single word. Tell me the exact emotion you feel the moment their name appears on your phone screen. It could be dread, exhaustion, fear, anger, emptiness, or guilt. Name it. Do not hide it, because naming the wound is always the first necessary step toward cleaning it. And at the end of this video, I will ask you to come back to that exact word and see if the heavy chains have started to loosen. Hit the like button right now, not for the algorithm, but as a small, deliberate act of courage. Let it be a physical acknowledgement that you are tired of living in constant fear. Let it mean that you are finally ready to seek the truth, even if it completely disrupts the false peace of your family dynamic. That small act of honesty is already the very first step out of the trap. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. This is a place where the ancient wisdom of the saints meets the bleeding wounds of modern life. And real healing is never the easy kind. Now, let us go back 7 centuries and discover exactly what Saint Thomas Aquinas knew about toxic families, manipulative parents, and holy boundaries that we have completely forgotten. Let us look at the man who will be our guide today. Thomas Aquinas lived in the 13th century. We often picture medieval saints as quiet figures floating in glowing cathedrals, completely detached from the messy reality of human relationships. We think they could not possibly understand the complex psychological warfare of a modern Thanksgiving dinner or a manipulative text message. But Thomas understood family dysfunction on a deeply personal level. He was born into a wealthy, powerful, and incredibly ambitious Italian noble family. His parents had a very specific plan for his life. They wanted him to become the powerful abbot of a prestigious monastery, a position that would bring wealth and political influence to their family name. Sound familiar? They saw his life as an extension of their own ego. But Thomas felt called to join the Dominicans, a new and radical order of begging friars. When he pursued his own calling, his family did not just express disappointment. His own brothers ambushed him on the road, kidnapped him, and locked him inside a family castle for over a year. They tried every form of manipulation to break his will. They used their power, their money, and their biological authority to try and destroy the path God had given him. So when Thomas Aquinas writes about the duties we owe to our parents, he is not writing from naive innocence. He is writing as a man who had to draw a massive, immovable boundary against his own flesh and blood to save his own soul. In his greatest work, the Summa Theologiae, specifically in the Secunda Secundae, which means the second part of the second part, Thomas dedicates profound attention to the virtues that govern human relationships. In question 101, he examines a virtue he calls pietas. In English, we often translate this as piety, which makes us think of folding our hands in church. But in the ancient Latin world, pietas meant the specific duty, respect, and gratitude we owe to our parents and our homeland, because they are the principles of our very existence. Thomas says we owe our parents a debt of honor, because they participated with God in giving us physical life. But here is where Thomas is absolutely brilliant. He does not stop there. He places pietas within a much larger and more important framework. In question 26 of that same section, he outlines the ordo caritatis. This translates to the order of charity, or the order of love. This concept is the ultimate ancient psychological map. Thomas explains that love is not just a blind, chaotic emotion. True love, holy love, has an objective order. You must love the right things, in the right way, and in the right proportion. God comes first. Your own soul comes second. If you are married, your spouse and your children come before your parents. Stop for a moment and let that sink in. Are you listening? If you are married, your duty to your spouse entirely supersedes your duty to your parents. Thomas calls this disordered love when you flip that hierarchy upside down. In modern language, disordered love is when you let your mother dictate how you raise your children. Disordered love is when you allow your father to constantly disrespect your husband or wife, and you stay silent just to keep the peace. You are taking the natural order of human flourishing and twisting it to satisfy the emotional demands of someone who refuses to respect your adult life. Thomas would say, that is not love, that is chaos. Think of a magnificent Gothic cathedral. To keep those massive stone walls from collapsing, medieval architects invented the flying buttress. It is a massive pillar of stone support. But here is the secret to why it works. The flying buttress always stands on the outside of the building. If you try to force that massive stone pillar inside the church, it will crush the altar and destroy the entire structure. Your relationship with a toxic parent must be exactly like that flying buttress. You can honor them, you can pray for them, and you can desire their ultimate good. But you must do it from the outside. You must establish a structural distance. You must stay outside the walls of their emotional chaos so your own life does not collapse. This brings us to the most massive misunderstanding that keeps millions of good people trapped in cycles of abuse. We have been taught a toxic, oversimplified version of the Fourth Commandment: honor your father and your mother. We hear those words, and we mistakenly translate them into a lifetime contract of emotional slavery. We think honoring them means we must always agree with them. We think honoring them means we must give them unlimited access to our homes, our finances, and our emotional energy. We deeply believe that setting a firm rule, like telling a manipulative mother she cannot visit unannounced, is somehow a mortal sin. But Thomas Aquinas destroys that stereotype completely. He makes a razor-sharp distinction between the office of the parent and the behavior of the person. You honor the office. You are grateful for the gift of biological life, but you do not have to honor the toxic behavior. You do not have to validate their narcissism. You do not have to participate in their endless family drama. In fact, Thomas argues that if a parent commands you to do something that violates your conscience or ruins the vocation God gave you, obeying them becomes a sin. You are actually commanded by God to disobey them. Right now, some of you are nodding because you recognize yourself in every single word I just said. You recognize the crippling anxiety. You recognize the exact way your parents use guilt as a weapon of mass destruction. What Thomas described 700 years ago, modern psychology has finally caught up to and confirmed with clinical studies. Modern therapists call this enmeshment. They call it a lack of differentiation. They call it emotional blackmail. Psychology tells us that when a family system is highly toxic, the person who tries to set a healthy boundary is immediately labeled as the traitor. They will call you selfish. They will call you ungrateful. They will tell the rest of the extended family how cruel and cold-hearted you are. But listen to me very carefully. You are not selfish. You are simply establishing the ordo caritatis. You are putting love back into its proper, holy order. You are building a solid foundation for your own mental health and your own family. And this brings us to the hardest part of the journey. Because knowing the theory of boundaries is one thing, facing the brutal reality of your own family dynamics and admitting the lies you have been telling yourself is something entirely different. You have been telling yourself a very pious lie for a very long time. You tell yourself that by picking up the phone and listening to an hour of manipulation, you are practicing Christian patience. You tell yourself that by allowing your mother to criticize your parenting, or your father to belittle your career, you are carrying your heavy cross. But Saint Thomas Aquinas saw through that subtle lie centuries ago. Every time you surrender your boundaries to keep a toxic peace, you are not practicing virtue. You are actually practicing cowardice. You are choosing the easy path of compliance because you are absolutely terrified of their anger. You are drinking salt water to quench your thirst, hoping that if you just drink enough of it, it will eventually turn into fresh water. It will never turn into fresh water. And before you close this video, before you think I am here to judge you from some high mountain, let me say this. I struggle with this too. We all do. The desire to be loved by the people who brought us into this world is the deepest hunger of the human heart. This is not an accusation coming from moral superiority. It is a spiritual diagnosis that includes every single one of us. We all want our parents to finally look at us and be proud. But when you sacrifice the peace of your own home to buy a temporary truce with a toxic parent, you are not building a holy family. You are actively enabling their sin. Thomas Aquinas teaches that true charity means willing the ultimate good of the other person. Enabling someone to continue abusing you is not willing their good. It is participating in their spiritual sickness. Perhaps you are thinking right now that this goes against everything the gospel teaches. You are thinking about the words of Jesus Christ himself. Did the Lord not command us to forgive 70 times 7? Are we not supposed to turn the other cheek when someone strikes us? And there is profound truth in that. I am not preaching bitterness. I am not telling you to hate your parents. But there is a massive, life-saving difference between forgiveness and access. And that difference is precisely what we have lost in modern Christianity. You can forgive someone, and still choose distance. You can release the resentment without releasing the boundaries. You can love them from afar without letting them destroy you. Jesus Christ forgave the very people who nailed his hands to the wood of the cross. But he did not step down from that cross to go have dinner with them. He forgave them from a necessary distance. Forgiveness happens entirely inside your own heart. It is the holy act of canceling a debt so that you no longer have to carry the heavy poison of resentment inside your own body. But access is a completely different reality. Access means allowing someone into your daily life, your physical home, and your emotional space. You are strictly required by God to forgive your parents, but you are absolutely not required to give them unlimited access to your mind. Why is it so incredibly hard to separate these two things? Stop for a moment and look closely at your own motives. Why do we keep walking back into the fire, desperately hoping that this time it will not burn us? Saint Thomas Aquinas would point directly to a subtle form of idolatry. We have made idols out of our parents. We have placed them on a throne that belongs only to God. We subconsciously believe that if our parents do not validate our choices, our lives have no actual value. We are violating the order of love by placing the creature far above the Creator. And when you do that, the entire structure of your life becomes deeply unstable. You cannot build a peaceful home on a foundation of constant anxiety and desperate approval-seeking. Remember the flying buttress of the magnificent Gothic cathedral. It is a massive stone structure that supports the high walls, but it only works if it remains firmly on the outside. When you desperately crave the approval of a manipulative mother or a controlling father, you are dragging that massive stone pillar inside the church. You are letting their toxic demands occupy the most sacred space of your own soul. And when you do that, the roof eventually caves in. Your marriage suffers because you are constantly stressed. Your children feel your nervous energy. Your physical body begins to break down under the extreme weight of emotional suppression. You cannot support your parents. You cannot honor them properly. If your own inner sanctuary is reduced to absolute rubble, true piety, the genuine honor you owe your parents, sometimes looks exactly like a closed door. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a toxic person is to stop allowing them to commit the sin of emotional abuse against you. By drawing a firm line, you are actually protecting them from their own worst vices. You are stopping the brutal cycle of generational trauma dead in its tracks. And that is a truly holy act. So, how do you actually break free from these heavy chains? How do you reconstruct the walls of your life without losing your Catholic faith? Saint Thomas Aquinas left us 4 practical principles that you can begin applying today. The first remedy Thomas Aquinas offers is learning to separate the office of the parent from the behavior of the person. According to Saint Thomas, we owe our parents reverence because they are the physical principle of our birth, but that reverence is directed at their role as the givers of life. It is not a blanket approval of their toxic choices. In modern psychological terms, you can deeply respect the fact that she is your mother without respecting the fact that she is a manipulator. You can honor the fact that he is your father without accepting his constant verbal abuse. Imagine you are on a phone call. Your mother begins to criticize your weight, your spouse, or your financial decisions for the 100th time. The practical action you must take today is to establish a behavioral boundary using respectful but immovable language. You do not yell. You do not insult her back. You do not try to desperately explain yourself. You simply say that you love her, but you will not discuss this topic. And if she continues, you will hang up the phone. And when she continues, because toxic people will always test a new boundary, you must actually hang up the phone. You are honoring her office by speaking with dignity, but you are binding her toxic behavior by removing your presence. When you hang up that phone, the false guilt will immediately try to suffocate you. You will feel like a terrible son or a terrible daughter, but you must fight that feeling with the truth. You just protected your own peace, which is a gift from God. The second remedy requires you to brutally enforce the order of love in your daily life. Thomas teaches that the order of charity demands we prioritize our primary vocation over our family of origin. If you are married, your ultimate earthly loyalty belongs entirely to your spouse and your children. Your parents have dropped to the second tier of your relational hierarchy. This is not cruel, and it is not ungrateful. This is the exact design of God for human flourishing. Think about the upcoming holidays. Think about a father who demands that you spend every single Christmas exactly as he dictates, completely ignoring the traditions you want to build with your own children. The resentment builds in your spouse, but you comply just to avoid a massive argument. You must stop doing this. The practical step here is to say no to the toxic event in order to say yes to your marriage. Right now, someone watching this is realizing that their marriage has been slowly bleeding to death because they have always prioritized their mother's demands over their wife's tears. Stop doing that today. You must sit down with your spouse, decide what is best for your immediate family, and then communicate that decision to your parents. You deliver it as a final verdict, not as a negotiation. You are not asking for their permission to be an adult. You are informing them of your boundary. Do not sacrifice your sacred sacrament on the altar of parental approval. If this analysis is beginning to illuminate something deeply hidden inside you, subscribe to this channel, because here we do not do surface-level content or empty positive thinking. Here, we bring the massive, unshakable wisdom of centuries to heal the bleeding wounds of today. And we are just getting started. The next remedy might surprise you. Coming from a medieval monk, it is the last thing you would expect. But do not skip ahead. The third remedy is utilizing physical distance as a profound act of charity. We often mistakenly think that being physically present is the only valid way to show love. But Thomas understood human nature perfectly. He knew that if your physical presence causes the other person to fall into the sin of wrath, or causes you to fall into the sin of despair, proximity is actually destroying both of your souls. Remember the flying buttress of the cathedral. It must remain on the outside to provide true structural support. Are you paying attention to your own body? Your body keeps the score of every crossed boundary. If every time you visit their house it ends in screaming, subtle manipulation, or you crying in your car afterward, you are not failing by staying away. You are failing by continually going back and expecting a cup of poison to suddenly taste like sweet wine. Distance is often the necessary medicine for a deeply sick relationship. The practical action is to strategically reduce their access to your physical and emotional space. If you talk to them every single day and it leaves you exhausted, you must reduce it to once a week. If weekly visits end in a disaster, you must reduce them to monthly visits in a public place where they are forced by social pressure to behave properly. You are not punishing them. You are protecting the temple of your own mind. You are removing the fuel from the fire of their dysfunction. The fourth and final remedy is the most difficult of all, but it is the ultimate fulfillment of the Fourth Commandment when a relationship is completely shattered. It is learning to pray for them without participating in their sickness. There are extreme cases of psychological or physical abuse where any contact at all is dangerous to your survival. Modern society will tell you to simply cut them off, cancel them, and forget they ever existed. But the Catholic tradition demands something far more heroic from you. You must remember that true piety requires us to will their ultimate good. And their ultimate good is the salvation of their immortal soul, not the satisfaction of their controlling ego. The practical step, especially if you have had to go completely no contact with a deeply abusive parent, is to fight for them spiritually while remaining physically absent. You do not pick up the phone. You do not answer the manipulative text messages. You do not show up to the chaotic family gathering. Instead, you pray the rosary for their deep healing. You offer your fasts during Lent for their conversion. You have masses said for the salvation of their soul. This is the ultimate, most beautiful application of the flying buttress. You are standing far outside the destructive blast zone of their unhealed trauma. You are fiercely protecting the beautiful life you have built. You are guarding the sacred peace of your own mind, but you are still sending powerful spiritual grace into their lives through the mystery of prayer. Spiritual communion does not require physical proximity. You can fight for their soul from 1,000 miles away. You can love them fiercely without ever letting them speak to you again. And in the eyes of God, that is the highest and most profound form of honor you can possibly give them. Let us bring all of this powerful ancient truth together. Honoring your father and your mother does not mean surrendering your mental health or the sacred peace of your own home. Saint Thomas Aquinas taught us that true piety separates the honorable office of the parent from the deeply toxic behavior of the individual person. He showed us that the holy order of love strictly requires you to protect your marriage and your children before satisfying the demands of your parents. He proved that physical distance can be a profound and necessary act of charity when closeness only creates a cycle of abuse. And he revealed that you can fight fiercely for the salvation of a completely broken parent through spiritual prayer, without ever giving them physical access to destroy your life again. So I ask you a very difficult and necessary question right now. Which of these 4 ancient remedies do you need to apply today? Which boundary have you been too terrified to build because you were afraid of losing a toxic peace? Which manipulative behavior have you been actively enabling under the false and damaging name of Christian patience? You cannot change the painful way you were raised, and you cannot fix their unhealed trauma, but you have absolute control over what you choose to tolerate right now. Your practical action for today is to choose one specific boundary and strictly enforce it. It might be calmly declining a phone call when you know it will end in tears. It might be saying no to a massive holiday gathering that always destroys your mental health. It might be sitting down with your spouse and declaring that from this day forward, your marriage completely outranks parental demands. Choose one single thing, and do not back down when the guilt tries to manipulate you. There is absolutely nothing more spiritual than protecting the human dignity that God freely gave you. Now go back to the comment you wrote at the very beginning of this video. Look closely at that one word you typed about how you feel when their name appears on your phone screen. Write a second word directly underneath it. Tell me the exact emotion you feel right now after hearing the truth. Maybe the feeling is exactly the same. Maybe something deep inside you has finally shifted. Maybe you feel a sudden and powerful surge of courage. Simply notice the difference and write it down. If this message woke something deep inside of you, hit the like button. Do it not as an empty gesture for a computer algorithm, but as a personal, physical declaration that today, the cycle of generational trauma begins to break. Share this exact video with someone who is carrying the same crushing weight on their shoulders. Send it to someone who desperately needs to hear that the deepest tradition of our Catholic faith has real answers for their pain. Not empty platitudes, but real, life-saving answers. And subscribe to this channel if you want to continue this profound journey into the ancient wisdom of the saints. Remember the grand cathedral and the magnificent flying buttress. You are currently building a beautiful life in a holy family of your own. Do not let the false guilt drag that massive stone pillar inside to crush the sacred altar of your own home. Keep the boundary firm, strong, and entirely on the outside. Support them with your silent prayers from a safe distance, and let your own inner sanctuary remain a place of absolute peace. May Saint Thomas Aquinas intercede for you. May you find in his brilliant wisdom the ultimate courage to protect your immortal soul. And may you always remember that God desires your profound healing, not your lifelong emotional slavery. This is a place where the wisdom of the saints meets the wounds of today, where truth is spoken even when it hurts, where healing begins not with easy answers, but with honest ones. Welcome home.